Hello everybody, welcome back to the Overlap Breakdown YouTube channel. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Umir, who's a professional analyst and scout. And today we're here to cover everything tactical preview for the Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur game. We're going to kick it right off from the top and say that since Pep Guardiola has come to Manchester City, the lowest points per game against any Premier League team that he's faced is Tottenham Hotspur. It's also the side he has lost the most games against. Out of 16 games, he's only won 7, drawn 3 and lost 6, leaving him with a points per game of 1.5. With Manchester United actually second, which for me I thought was quite interesting because I've always seen us get battered. But
I feel like in the Ole era, the same sort of style.
That is all because of Ole. It goes Chelsea, Liverpool, and then the 5th and 6th team are Wolves and Leicester, which is pretty interesting, and they've played 13 and 14 against
Jamie Vardy and Adama.
Same
pattern kind of
transition.
Thing. Yeah.
So straight away, we're going to kick it off by saying that on the right side of me here, we have the red team, which is going to be Spurs, and then Umir's controlling the blue counters, which is obviously going to be Manchester City. And last season in this game, it was quite an interesting one, and both games had caveats, I'd like to say. The first game, which was this fixture last season, which was at the Etihad Stadium, it finished 3-3. And we went through the lineups before, and this was one of the games where Ange Postecoglou started 4 fullbacks in defence. So he went Vicario, Emerson Royal, Ben Davies, Pedro Porro, and Udogie, and that was his back 4. Obviously, that's not going to be the case this time round. And then in the fixture at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, it was 2-0 Manchester City, but it was the game that every Tottenham fan wanted to lose because it could have given Arsenal a chance.
I know, big game.
Which is actually interesting because in that game they created 1.7 expected goals and didn't actually end up scoring a goal. But Haaland quickly put one away and then it was over. But yeah, it's a very interesting game. The 3-3 game was really insightful because it lent on a lot of Manchester City pinning, but then also Spurs trying to play with the ball. In the games last season, Spurs had 45% possession and 54% possession, so obviously they are going to try and have the ball against Manchester City, as we know from a Tottenham side. As a City fan, I just wanted to ask you, not just under Ange Postecoglou, even though I feel like it has been a little bit intensified, why do you think that Manchester City struggles so much historically in this fixture under Pep Guardiola against Tottenham?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going historically, I think it always makes sense to look back at the personnel and the managers that have been in charge of teams that have done well against Manchester City. So if we're looking at Spurs, obviously if you go back, you think about Jose Mourinho, you think about Antonio Conte, you think about Ange Postecoglou now. Ange is a little bit different from the other two, but in general, you've got a team that have brilliant quality in springing those transition situations, and they aren't afraid of giving up possession in order to get their best players in those chances. Harry Kane, for a long period of time, a brilliant finisher and able to launch those quick wingers to attack in behind. I think like Heung-min Son is one of the players who Manchester City fans have had nightmares about. Guardiola probably has had nightmares about 4 years. So in that sense, with Manchester City, there's always a risk when you're committing so many players forward. You've got sort of 2 or 3 on the halfway line. You've got a player like Harry Kane at that time. Now, Solanke, you're seeing him drop in a little bit. You're seeing some of these passes played from Kulusevski. After Solanke plays this sort of bounce pass into one of the midfielders. Maddison as well has the capability of doing the same thing. And now, obviously, Brendan Johnson can attack those spaces. In the recent cup tie, Werner attacked those spaces as a quick transitional player. And then Son, obviously, still there. So I think from a philosophy perspective, their team is built to counter Manchester City's weaknesses, which are attacking the big spaces that they leave by pushing on so highly, and especially if you've got good box defenders, that becomes more magnified against an opposition like this and the ones that you listed before.
If you want to talk about how Spurs could cause them problems, one of the things that we alluded to in the Ange Postecoglou video was that Tottenham have often played 2 kind of 8s or 10s in the midfield, and they're not having too much running power in the centre to break through teams, and that defensively they are a bit shaky. In Manchester City's defence, I think they have been exposed to a lot of transitions, and if we're asking Ange Postecoglou to get more runners in behind and launch longer balls and do stuff like that, Dominic Solanke, Brennan Johnson and Heung-min Son as a front three, as a collective so far this season have shown the ability to do that. I think that's going to be an area where they're looking to have Solanke kind of drop in a little bit, get the wingers a lot more central and running inside. Heung-min Son works his best when he's cutting inside, as we've spoken about. Brennan Johnson this season has scored numerous amounts of goals running at the back post. He's one of the best back post runners in the league.
He almost reminds me, it's an interesting comparison, but he almost reminds me in how he attacks this space here, how Raheem Sterling used to do it.
Yeah, no, it's a very good one. Raheem Sterling had a knack for scoring
just
goals.
Just being in that area as a winger, yeah.
As a City fan, are you worried about how many problems this front three could cause? Not just with the personnel they've got, but the dynamics in which they play. Both wingers coming inside, the 9 dropping, pulling people out of position. Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, so I think naturally it's a very interesting front line. It's a very strong threat in their dynamics. I think when you're looking at how Manchester City do play, we've had a couple of injuries at the back for the last few weeks, so it depends who comes in. I think someone like Ruben Dias is a fairly important player in a game like this, because against Solanke, when he does drop deep, I think you need a player who can almost follow him, play it on his back, put that pressure on him. I think Manchester City, what we saw in the game, again, I reference the cup tie because it's the most recent sort of picture that we have against these two teams. Manchester City did try to press a little bit higher. Obviously in the Brighton game they sat in a little bit more. But in trying to press a little bit higher, you force Spurs to play sort of against how they want to play and go a little bit long. I know in times that makes sense, and we said in our recent video that look, Spurs should play on that quality a little bit more. But if you've got really strong players who can win these duels in defence for Manchester City, the likes of Akanji, perhaps Stones, if we have Ruben Dias back, then I wouldn't be as worried. I think it is a worrying situation in general, but I would be less worried.
In the game at the Etihad, when it was 3-3, as I like to reference, your front three was Jeremy Doku, Julian Alvarez, Erling Haaland, Phil Foden and Bernardo Silva. Now, I don't think that's a bad front line at all.
No.
One thing I will say is I don't think City, going through the problems they are currently having, can field a front five like that.
No.
I think that I know Mateus Nunes has seen quite a lot of joy coming off the left, but I think them sort of legs in the midfield is something that City need in this game. I think City needs someone in midfield. I know it's been Kovacic and Gundogan who are kind of rotating in there.
Yeah.
I know De Bruyne is just coming back. I'm not sure if he's going to start the game, but Pep's never been a manager to rush players back from injury and stick them in the lineup straight away. I don't know who's going to be sacrificed for this, if you like, but I think Manchester City need an extra pair of legs in there who maybe isn't as quality on the ball or in terms of dropping deep or being a good six. I think in the game against Spurs last season, it was when the Akanji midfield experiment was going on. Yeah. So we could maybe see something like that again, just to get another body next to Kovacic.
I mean, I've kind of wanted to see Manchester City push a centre-back into midfield this season in lack of one of those sort of traditional number sixes. We don't have Rodri in there, so I thought that would have been a solution that Pep looked to. He's not done it, and you know, although it would be useful, I don't know if he will do it in this game. I think one, because of the injuries that we have in the back line, but two, I completely agree with you in the fact that we need somebody with more steel, more legs, more running power in this midfield. I think Nunes at times has been moved into midfield almost as a substitute or in second parts of the game. So he started on the left wing. When another player's come on, he's moved in.
He moves back in,
But I don't think he's looked the strongest player in there, even though he's got the physical attributes for it. In terms of what Pep might do in this situation, if Rico Lewis is fit, what we saw in the recent game between the two teams was Rico Lewis moved infield here. You had the right centre-back push out here a little bit. I think it was Stones. Dias here, and then Ake formed sort of a back three here. With Rico Lewis in this position, you had your other 6 here, and then you had your 2 midfielders. And it was a very sort of classic 3-2-5. I think why this works and why we might see this again is City got a lot of joy in this play. It was McAtee in that game, in that cup game. We had Nico O'Reilly here, who's actually got good running power, good legs, very tall player, very physical player, and intelligent in terms of the spaces that he picks up to receive. But a lot of the joy came in this area because Spurs played with Kulusevski on that side. So this almost defended, I think, like a 4-5-1 or a 4-4-2 with Kulusevski being that player who jumps a little bit. When you've got your team like this, with Rico Lewis moving infield, I think it was Werner on that occasion, he didn't know whether to track him all the way in, but he did play a little bit more narrow. You had this sort of pivot that could progress the ball, and they aimed to sort of move and pull Kulusevski out a little bit. So a lot of the joy was here. I think finding Phil Foden in these situations as a left footer would be really dangerous and a really intelligent sort of scheme for Manchester City to play on. And with all of these numbers in here, what Phil Foden does do is offer a lot of running power, tracking back. I think he's one of the players who Manchester City and Pep might look to as a solution in Rodri's absence. His running power, I know we always talk about him as a frontline player, but this sort of transition into a more of a central midfield role would be really impressive.
Yeah.
And a player here, for example, Bernardo Silva, I know he's not the tallest, but he still has those legs on his day. So that sort of four in midfield, Kovacic or Gundogan, Rico Lewis, Foden, Bernardo Silva. I think if De Bruyne comes in, it would be brilliant. But, you know, if we're thinking De Bruyne won't play, that four makes sense on paper, given how City played against Spurs the first time, and given some of the joy that they can find sort of in this left half space area.
Pretty much like a 4-4-2. They've got a situation where both the full-backs are man-to-man. You could maybe even adopt it so this guy maybe tucks in a bit more, so it's like that.
Yeah.
But if they don't, I think personally for me, looking at Manchester City, the way they set up, looking at the personnel that's going to be available, even if it is Phil Foden and Bernardo Silva like you just alluded to, I think the ability to go from the defenders or the goalkeeper directly into Erling Haaland and attack the space in behind is something that I think will be a massive plus for City to look at. In the game against Ipswich Town, both the goals come from transitional-ish moments, more when the keeper had the ball and then Spurs got sucked onto them and then they played over and into the space. And I think the reason why this has been a problem for Spurs is, as we mentioned, the backline chemistry isn't there. We've often talked about Spurs last season when they had Porro, Romero, Van der Ven, Udogie being this like ridiculously good team, and then once one of them's out, it's a problem for them.
Yeah.
Spurs have played Dragou, Romero, Porro and Udogie, and just this disconnection here in the recent weeks has cost Spurs quite a lot, and it leaves to Romero either pushing inside to go with a player.
I think that's the main.
And then it leaves you 1-to-1 at the back here with a player like Erling Haaland.
Yeah.
Manchester City want to keep the ball, they want to play out from the back, but Pep Guardiola has adopted this method in recent years where Ederson's long ball percentages have gone really, really high up.
And playing through the centre is really a big part of that. I think what Manchester City do well, and is built on the brilliance of some of these really intelligent players, Bernardo Silva, for example, Rico Lewis, etc. If you do, let's say we move Rico Lewis just out here for the time being in this sort of build-up situation, in sort of setups like this, you'd be expected to say one of the Spurs players might, depending on what side the ball goes, they'll push up on the keeper, you cut off this side of the pitch a little bit, but you'll see maybe one of these players jump here. But the main key in trying to play through the centre is by pulling your markers to certain sides. So I wouldn't be surprised to see these players really wide, just to they might play here, play a little bit narrow to stop that pass going out there, and not play too wide to open the passes into these players. But your six, you might see one of them move here, you might see Bernardo drop into these spaces, and you're pulling your markers out of position to open this passing lane. That's been a key for Manchester City, and for Ederson in particular, with that quality to find his player in here. You've got Phil Foden obviously as well, who I think will play.
Off him.
Yeah, just off him. So whether he runs into this space or whether he drops in here to receive, and his player has to follow him. And I think in this situation that would actually be Romero. And as we talked about, Romero is very aggressive, front-footed. That's a natural tendency that you can play on. Try and entice him out of these areas, and then whether you get someone like Doku back in the side to attack these spaces, or Nunes who can play in those big spaces. So essentially what you're trying to do is play on the principles of the opposition side. God knows what this board looks like now. But you're trying to play on the principles of an Ange side. They want to jump, they want to press, and in being aggressive, you can move them apart because they want to jump on you, and then you can play through these spaces and attack them.
So we've got two little more segments to finish up. I'm going to give my Spurs 11 for the game. What would your Manchester City 11 hypothetically look like?
It's interesting because injuries and coming back from... You
don't really know who's going to be there and who's not going to be there.
But if I'm talking sort of in theory, we go Edison, obviously. I would like Rico Lewis in here.
Yeah.
Just for the quality that he has in the build-up. And I think the 3-2-5 shape against Spurs works really nicely, given how they do press. So let's say I put Rico Lewis in here. In this area, you need someone who can defend wide and also play centrally, so it wouldn't be Kyle Walker. I really love John Stones to play in this area, but I think Akanji makes the most sense.
I think Akanji, yeah.
Yeah, especially against a Son-type player. Ruben Dias in here. And then I would like Guardiola playing here. Because obviously you can push. Brendan Johnson's not the best at tracking back in those areas. He can, attack these spaces really well. Then, we've said Rico Lewis inverts here. My DM, Kovacic's probably best in form.
Yeah.
I would love to see Gundogan make that position his own. But I think it'll take some time. And Kovacic has been good in possession.
Yep.
So I don't think Guardiola will stray too far from it, even though I'd probably personally like Gundogan in there. Bernardo Silva for me in here. Foden in this inside left channel. Savinho, if he's back, if he's fit. Haaland up top. And then in this position up here, I'd probably go Nunes again for now. Yeah. But I think that left wing spot, I don't mind. Even if we get Grealish back in there, we've not seen Grealish for a while. His probing nature pens teams in.
I think it could be a game where Pep Guardiola looks to... We've seen how erratic both teams are. Yeah, I think it could be a game where Pep Guardiola sticks the most retention players in the team. We were talking about getting legs into the midfield, but it could be a game where Pep Guardiola goes, listen, I need me Jack Grealishes, I need me Bernardo Silva's on the pitch who are constantly going to keep the ball, and obviously they work hard off it as well. I think for me, if I was going to be the Spurs advocate, Vicario in net. I do think Vicario, I watched the Spurs game last week. The set pieces for Vicario need to improve. It's not ended in too many goals as of yet this season in terms of against corners.
We've improved our corners, by the way. Just to mention, in case it does happen, Bernardo Silva, what we've seen this season is
he stands
on the keeper. Rico Lewis does it sometimes when Bernardo doesn't play, and then we're targeting the back post heavily. So whether or not we do that against Vicario, because he doesn't seem comfortable in the crowd.
If you remember last season in the North London derby, it was Ben White who stood on Vicario, and he did the thing where he was playing with the gloves, and they conceded from it, didn't they?
Yeah.
So I think if Bernardo Silva is to have that role against Vicario again, we could see something similar.
Yeah.
I think City are probably a bigger team on paper, even without Rodri in the team. I think if Ruben Dias can somehow get back in there, Akanji can get back in there.
Even
Haaland,
I've not mentioned them, but they're really good set-piece threats if one of them plays.
If they can get back into the team, then they do have a massive advantage, which in a game full of man-marking, positional play, it could come down to a corner. And he does flap at a lot of corners.
I'm just thinking sort of Nunes versus Porro if you ping it in.
Yeah. So Vicario, even though he needs to improve the set pieces, I think Pedro Porro has been poor defensively in recent weeks, but I think he does have to start. I think he's the best right back at the club. Romero has to start because Ange Postecoglou will be heavy metal and he will want to go in, so they need that man marker.
I think he's the best centre back at the club as well.
Yeah, he is the best centre half at the club. I don't know what the case is with Mickey van der Ven. Obviously, he played fullbacks in the lineup last year. Dragu's not in really. I'm not really sure Dragu's cutting the mustard for him. But I think he will play it just for the height. Kind of. He is a decent box defender. He is decent, but he's more of a low block guy for me. Destiny Udogie will probably play left back for me. I think he's had a bit of a slow start to the season also, and he's going to be up against Savinho, who's a very technical winger, someone who wants to create chances, take risks. In midfield, this is the big one for me. I'm probably going to lean towards dropping James Maddison in a game like this and starting Kulusevski as the most advanced midfielder. I think Kulusevski in recent years has had more joy against Manchester City. I think you describe he has that Kevin De Bruyne running quality where he can get through the middle.
Spinning on his mind.
I think if a game like this where you can get in behind City's midfielders, carry the ball, be a bit robust in there.
Really good final pass. I know as much as Maddison has a brilliant final ball, Kulusevski combines all of that really well.
I think in this game, Ange Postecoglou will use like a Sarr, Bentancur, Basuma, Sarr dynamic.
And have the double pivot.
Just a double pivot with a lot more metal in there and a lot more running power.
Yeah.
And then, as we mentioned, the front three, I don't think it should change. Brennan Johnson, Solanke, Son. I think it has the perfect dynamics to cause Manchester City's back three problems. I watched an international match yesterday. I don't think Gavardio had a great time defending out wide. Maybe Brennan Johnson can work on his movements in behind the back post. I don't think anyone's really got in behind Gavardio, and asked him to really defend the 6-yard areas or the back post area. So it'll be interesting to see if he can do that. Brennan Johnson, Dominic Solanke down the middle, really good intelligent mover in front of the face of the goal, can really get in behind these players, as we were speaking about before, peeling off players. Can he get in behind a midfielder, pick up the ball?
Yep.
And Son, undeniable quality when coming from out wide to inside. But I do think that Akanji is one of your best out wide defenders, so that's going to be an interesting battle. To cap it off, score prediction?
I need. This is not a prediction. This is a prayer.
Yeah.
At home, we'll go with 2-1.
You're gonna go 2-1.
You know, I'll go 3-1. Let's back the boys.
I was gonna say 3-1 after you said 2-1.
Let's back the boys.
I'm gonna go.
But we don't have any scorers. XG Haaland.
XG Haaland, yeah.
Go on, Phil.
That's a good point actually. XG Haaland.
You know, I will stick 3-1.
3-1.
Yeah.
I've got to give Spurs a goal.
Yeah, I mean that's what I thought.
I've got to give Spurs a goal because I think
we'll probably win by. I want to win by 2.
Yeah, because if all the analysis we've done, if my prediction is City going to keep a clean sheet, and it's going to be smooth sailing, then it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go 2-2.
I can see that as well.
I don't know why. It's not a loss, so it won't be a crisis.
Yeah.
But I think.
But it's bad for both teams.
Yeah, it's bad for both teams.
Spurs,
yeah.
I think Spurs would.
I think Spurs will do similar to what they did the other year against you. They'll take the lead early.
Yeah.
And then I think
recently
kind of
this season they've been conceding first.
Oh yeah,
so I think so have we though.
Yeah. But no, it's going to be interesting. It's probably one of the most anticipated games every Premier League season because it seems to be the team that can go up against the Guardiola
one of the more
team
exciting ones, yeah.
and do it.
Similar to like the Klopp.
Yeah, it is a little bit without the quality.
Yeah,
the quality. But, yeah. That's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the tactical preview of the biggest game come this weekend against Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester City. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. And we'll see you next week for more tactical analysis and Premier League reviews. Thank you.